Have you ever wondered why religious disputes seem endless? Why every group feels certain that it alone possesses the truth, while others are seen as misguided? Throughout history, communities that believed they were defending God often ended up losing the very spirit of faith. In the midst of these conflicts, the Quran offers a profound reminder, one that does not merely address historical disagreements, but speaks directly to the inner condition of the human heart. Verses 113 and 114 of Surah Al-Baqarah gently unveil a spiritual truth. When the ego enters religion, the light of faith becomes veiled. But when the heart becomes humble, divine wisdom begins to unfold. Let us explore these verses phrase by phrase, opening the door to the deeper spiritual wisdom that awakens the soul. Verse 113. The Jews say, the Christians stand on nothing. The verse begins by describing a dispute. On the surface, the Quran is referring to a historical dispute between two religious communities, but mystics often invite us to see an inner reflection within such verses. The deeper question becomes, what happens to the human heart when identity becomes more important than truth? When religion becomes a banner of pride rather than a path to humility, the heart slowly hardens. Instead of seeking God, people begin defending their group, their tradition, their ego. In this state, faith transforms into tribal identity rather than spiritual realization. The moment you believe only your path leads to God, you may have already begun walking away from Him, because God is not captured by labels. He is found in His sincerity. And the Christians say, the Jews stand on nothing. The Quran mirrors the accusation back. Each group denies the legitimacy of the other. From a spiritual perspective, this reveals a timeless pattern of the human ego. The ego thrives on comparison. It feels elevated only when another is lowered. Yet divine truth does not belong to any faction. It is not inherited through identity alone. It is awakened through living faith. Mystics often describe this condition as the veil of religious pride. A person may speak about God constantly, yet remain far from Him in the heart. The Quran subtly exposes this condition. When people fight over God, they often forget God. While they recite the scripture, this phrase is deeply striking. Here lies the spiritual paradox. They possessed revelation. They read sacred texts. They were people of scripture, yet they still fell into rivalry and denial. The Sufi tradition often pauses at this line with deep reflection, because this verse quietly asks every believer a personal question. Is it possible to read divine words without allowing them to transform the heart? Yes, it happens often. One can memorize scripture, yet remain distant from its spirit. The tongue may recite, but the heart may remain asleep. True recitation is not merely sound, it is absorption. When the Quran enters the heart, it softens pride, increases compassion, and dissolves arrogance. If recitation increases hostility instead, the words may have touched the lips, but not the soul. Thus, the ignorant speak similar words. Here the Quran reveals something remarkable. The same language of denial used by earlier communities is repeated by others who lack knowledge. This teaches an eternal lesson. Ignorance often disguises itself as certainty. A person may feel absolutely convinced they possess the truth, yet that conviction may be rooted in inherited assumptions, rather than deep understanding. In Sufi thought, real knowledge produces humility. The more a person truly knows God, the more gentle their heart becomes. They recognize the vastness of divine wisdom and the limits of human perception. Ignorance, however, produces harshness. It simplifies reality into us and them. But divine truth is far more subtle than the ego allows. The verse concludes, "Law will judge between them on the day of resurrection concerning what they used to differ about." This statement restores balance. Human beings may argue endlessly, but the final judgment belongs only to God. The Sufi masters often reflect on this line with profound humility, because it reminds us the ultimate truth is known fully only by Allah. The responsibility of the believer is not to dominate religious arguments, but to purify the heart. Instead of obsessing over who is right, the seeker focuses on becoming sincere. For on the day of judgment, what will matter most is not the victory of our arguments, but the sincerity of our hearts. Verse 114, a deeper spiritual warning. Now the Quran moves from disputes of belief to a much deeper injustice by asking a powerful question. Who is more unjust than the one who prevents Allah's name from being mentioned in his mosques? Traditionally, scholars explain that this refers to those who obstruct worship or destroy places dedicated to God. But the Sufi perspective gently expands the reflection. A mosque is certainly a physical place, but the human heart is also a sanctuary of remembrance. When arrogance, hatred, and hostility dominate the heart, remembrance of God becomes difficult. In this sense, the greatest oppression is not only destroying a building, it is extinguishing the light of remembrance within hearts. Anything that pushes a person away from remembering God becomes a form of spiritual obstruction and strives for their ruin. Outwardly, this refers to physical damage to places of worship, but spiritually, destruction also occurs in subtle ways. When religion becomes a tool of division, when sacred words are used to humiliate others, when people are pushed away from faith through harshness, then the spirit of the mosque is already wounded, because the true purpose of a mosque is to bring hearts closer to God. If hearts leave feeling further from mercy, something essential has been lost. Sufi teachers often say, a heart that remembers God is a living mosque. It was not for them to enter them except in fear. And this phrase carries a powerful moral weight. It was not fitting for them to enter except in humility and reverence. The verse emphasizes inner fear of God, not terror but deep reverence. The mosque is a place where the ego bows, where pride dissolves, where the servant stands before the Creator with complete humility. If someone enters sacred spaces with arrogance, seeking dominance rather than devotion, they have misunderstood the very essence of worship. True entry into God's presence requires humility of the soul. The verse then warns, for them is disgrace in this world. Disgrace does not always appear as public humiliation. Sometimes it appears as spiritual emptiness. A person may possess influence, authority, or recognition, but inside they feel a quiet void. Because when the heart distances itself from divine remembrance, worldly success cannot fill the absence. This often describes as the exile of the soul. The soul longs for God. When that longing is ignored, a subtle restlessness begins to grow, and a great punishment in the hereafter. The Quran closes this warning by restoring ultimate justice. No injustice remains unseen. No arrogance escapes accountability. Yet the deeper purpose of such warnings is not fear alone, it is awakening. The Quran constantly invites humanity back to the path of humility, remembrance, and sincerity. The message of these verses is not merely historical. It speaks directly to every believer today. Every heart must ask, am I using religion to come closer to God or to elevate myself above others? Because the difference between those two intentions can determine the entire destiny of the soul. A final reflection. If we listen carefully, these verses whisper a profound truth. God does not belong to any group. Sacred spaces are not meant for rivalry, and the deepest form of worship is a heart filled with humility, remembrance, and sincerity. When the ego steps aside, faith becomes light. When the heart softens, divine wisdom begins to unfold. And when remembrance fills the soul, the entire universe begins to feel like a mosque. Every moment, an opportunity to turn toward God. If this reflection opened a new spiritual window in your heart, take a moment to reflect on these verses again slowly. Share this message with someone who seeks deeper meaning in the Quran and continue exploring the profound spiritual wisdom hidden within its words. Because sometimes a single verse understood with sincerity can transform the entire direction of a human life.